Welcome, everyone. Delighted to have you with us for a conversation with Martha Hoover. These are very painful and difficult times. We are all saddened and angry at injustice too long denied, scared about a pandemic still not fully understood or under control, and certainly worried about our future. A friend of mine, a recent Kenyan immigrant, now a citizen, told me what his son asked him the other day. His son said, "Why did you bring us here if they want to kill us?" So what are we to do when all is broken? When we discover the cliff we cling to is a sheer precipice? We do the only thing we can. We begin to carve. We have been treading water for too long. We need leaders who can guide us through these turbulent waters to help us navigate the storm and to make change. How very fortunate we are to have two such women with us today. Martha Hoover, who is our special guest, and Dion Willis, who will engage her in conversation. Dion is a six-time Emmy award-winning journalist and a veteran broadcaster and anchor. She has produced documentaries, written for magazines, and served on many community boards. She has also served as an assistant professor of journalism at Northeastern University. Responsible journalists like Dion are more and more important than ever. Martha Hoover owns many successful restaurants in Indianapolis, and I'm sure many of you have eaten at one or all of them, as I have. She partnered with local vendors and farmers years before the phrase farm to table was first uttered. Today, Patachu Inc. supports more Indiana family farms than all the other restaurants in Indianapolis combined. Her restaurants compost, recycle, and upcycle. They have banned the use of plastic water bottles and straws. In 2013, Martha created the Patachu Foundation to feed healthy meals to children in Indianapolis. Was so honored to be able to serve on the initial board. To date, the Patachu Foundation has served more than 150,000 nutritious meals to children in the community who live with pervasive food insecurity. Martha Hoover is a James Beard Culinary Award six-time semi-finalist. She cares about the quality of food she serves and especially cares about the quality of the community in which she lives. And she has made a tremendous difference. Welcome, Martha, and welcome, Dion. We look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And Martha, it is such a privilege to be here this morning and talk with you, especially now with all that's going on in the country, all that's going on in the restaurant industry, especially with COVID-19 and the economy as well. How has this damaged the restaurant industry? From your vantage point, what do you see, both here locally and nationally?
So before I answer the question, which I'm going to interpret as you're talking specifically about COVID and how it has impacted the restaurant, I'd like to take an exception with something that Sandy said that I hear so often, and I know it's a well-meaning criticism, and that is that things are broken. And actually, things are terrible. But they're not necessary, and this cannot be taken out of context. Things are happening that were designed to happen. So the very fact that that systems have been put in place purposely that that no longer are acceptable is different than thinking that something has broken. We have to really start from scratch and really look at the system in our country, how it impacts people of all skin colors, all religions, all economic stratas, and stop supporting systems that really were meant to literally break people down. So that aside, COVID has been, I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and the restaurant industry was truly the canary in the coal mine. We were the first major industry to be hit, and I believe that we will be the last industry to come back. And if I could, Dean, just put some numbers in this statement about we were the first to be hit, the last to come back. We're also the largest industry to be hit. And I think that is what is so surprising to so many people hearing about the restaurant industry really for the first time. You know, the restaurant industry is really good at theatrics. So people in the restaurant industry make it look like we are all happy and successful and doing everything correctly and that the food is amazing. And in essence, it's an extremely vulnerable system. But what we've not been very good about is telling people how large of an industry the restaurant industry is. Most people consider, for instance, the airline industry as a huge, and it is huge. It does about 100 in the United States. The airline industry consists of approximately 18 recognized carriers. You could probably name the top 6 or 8 within 2 seconds. You can think of them right now. Altogether, the airline industry in the United States has produced about $170 billion to be a year. That's a lot of money. And they employ about 750,000 people. That's a ton of people. By comparison, the restaurant industry consists of 670,000 locations, members, restaurants, and employs between 12 and 15 million people a year. The restaurant industry contributes over $1 trillion to the US economy. And the sales alone of restaurants are about $900 billion. The restaurant industry is the largest private industry in the United States. And COVID has not only hit us hard, but the reaction to COVID, the care packages have also underserved restaurants, mainly because our leaders don't really understand the restaurant model, and they don't really understand how big the industry is. We're not as represented and as organized as the airline industry. And as a further example of all the PPP money, the payroll and plan money that was awarded, 9% went to restaurants. So the remaining percent, the vast majority, 91% of all funds went to non-restaurant, non-hospitality businesses, such as the airlines.
Martha, we're also talking in human terms. So what is the fallout for women restaurateurs and minority restaurateurs of these local independent restaurants, as well as those who work in the restaurants, who are often minority, women, immigrants, who live very close to the margins anyway? Talk about what it is in human terms that you see.
Yeah, so without dialing down, let me answer, the question's got several components to it, because as you know, everything is complex, way more complex than you think when you're just looking at something. And the restaurant industry is like so many industries, the restaurant industry is filled with conflict and kind of internal hypocrisy. Restaurants are remarkable places for upward growth. The majority of people who open restaurants are actually members of our immigrant community. Women, people of color, immigrants, all come to restaurant work. There are very few adults out there who have not at some point in their life had a job with a restaurant. So these are complex issues because what has happened in the restaurant world is basically a microcosm of what is happening in society. My dear friend Davida Davison from Food Lab Detroit, in an interview the other day that I did of her actually, said it so well. She said and she was speaking specifically about COVID and how it has impacted her community in Detroit, her African-American community in Detroit. And she said, when industry coughs, people of color get pneumonia. So that is a very apt analogy for what has happened also in the restaurant industry. When I think what people are understanding for the first time is how vulnerable not only restaurant workers are, but also how vulnerable restaurants are. And is the system broken, or was it designed to have this level of vulnerability in it? And that's something we really have to deep dive on and figure out as we climb out of not just COVID, not just an economic recession, possibly a depression, but also this tremendous spotlight that's been placed on social injustice and inequity. When you talk about the restaurant industry and its impact on women, this is at women, immigrants, people of color. Here's the issue in a nutshell, is that women, people of color, and immigrants have been forced to the lower rungs of the restaurant industry. And not only have they been forced to the lower rungs of the restaurant industry, their opportunities for advancement have been kept at bay. And that's really the significant issue when it comes to just the sheer facts regarding gender, race, and country of origin.
None of us have a crystal ball, but where do you see this going or heading, if you can predict? And is there a way that we can either give a voice or help support, or what do you hope would happen from explaining this to people, informing us better?
Yeah, well, every industry, and because the restaurant industry is so large and so impactful, employs so many. I'll mention this. In the first 3 weeks of the mandated closures across the country of restaurants, over 80% of applications for unemployment insurance came from people working in the restaurant industry. Today, people receiving unemployment across the United States, 65% of people who are receiving unemployment are from the restaurant industry. Our numbers are huge and they are too big to ignore. So what do I hope? I hope that, look, I know how difficult it is climbing out of COVID and this horrible economic crisis. And I really believe that this is our time of reckoning and understanding that you don't fix something that's broken by going back to the janky system that it was, that you really recreate a system in a whole different way. Pas de Choux has been relatively successful at doing that since 1989. And it's not because I was an amazing visionary. I think context is critically important. It's not because I thought that the restaurant industry was so flawed and that I had a social consciousness that was way in advance of the time. I was not a pioneer, to be honest. What I was remarkably uneducated and naive. And this is one of those times that being uneducated and naive was actually an insane amount of freedom to create a company that I didn't know was not a normal restaurant. So what do I hope for? I hope that we have a reckoning where other restaurant owners start to understand not only the true vulnerability that they have put their workers in, but how that vulnerability translates and also means that they're vulnerable. And what we really have to work on better are a couple of things. we have to price our food better. Right now, all across America, there is a standardized menu pricing system that is basically price fixing, but it's sanctioned by the market. And what I mean by that is when you travel, you know pretty much what, for instance, a salmon dinner is going to cost wherever you go. And there is no way that that salmon dinner can be delivered to you in New York at the same pricing that it can be delivered to in Evansville, Indiana, for instance, because of different standards of living and different costs of living things. But we are forced to price food remarkably low. And the true issue for food pricing is that not only is it universally skewed, but also that price does not represent the true cost of getting food to a person's table. So I think we're going to see some reckoning with menu pricing. I think it's also going to be obvious to people that they need to, you really can vote with your consumer dollars, and supporting restaurants, restaurant chains, whether it's fast food, fast casual, or even independent chains, independent restaurants whose cultures do not match your value is something that's on the consumer. And these issues are particularly deep and complex, but if you don't like bro culture and don't want to support bro culture and you say you're a feminist and you're against that, you also shouldn't be supporting bro culture, whether it's in the restaurant industry or in the retail industry or whatever. And you really do have power with how you spend money. So you should support companies and businesses whose values align with yours on most major instances. And that's just something I think will happen more and more with people in food. I think there's going to be a real difference with our customers coming out of this. I think customers have been, particularly the customers that I have contact with, which are my customers, have become incredibly enlightened. Like, I'm just blown away, incredibly enlightened as to what is actually happening within the four walls of a restaurant, how insecure restaurants are, and how, beyond being insecure, how impactful the community restaurants are. And I think that what we're going to see, or at least what I'm hoping for, is a new understanding from customers that moves away from saying that the value of food is the most amount of food you can get for the cheapest amount of money. As again, I'll refer to the Food and Wine article that appeared just this week called, I've got the title right here, How I Got Radicalized Around Food. We all need to be radicalized around food. People talk about food justice, food access, food distribution, food policy, and certainly we're talking about that right now. But really what we should be talking about is access and equality and equity and distribution and justice, not just as it relates to food, but as it relates to everything in society. Because what we now understand clearly is that these issues surrounding poverty and lack of opportunity are built into a system, and we're now recognizing that. So it's time to change the systems as much as we can, including.
Yes, and what we're also understanding, and you just alluded to it, Martha, what we're also understanding now, we're in the midst of turmoil, protests, vigils, demonstrations in virtually every state across the country. Several of your downtown Indianapolis restaurants have been damaged.
Yes.
Talk about your response. Talk about how that fits with what you have just said.
Well, our response has been both external and extremely internal. And I will tell you, it does relate to COVID in this sense. Prior to when the restaurant industry really got notice that something was going on in the country with COVID was right after Valentine's Day. We were holding our breaths until the middle of March when the leaders of our states really stepped in to help. But almost universally, and numbers of the NRA, National Restaurant, not Rifle Association, bear this out. Restaurants across the country and across concept, across whether it was fine dining or fast casual or fast food, all saw a dip on February 15th. And that's when a dip in sales. And that dip steadily declined on a daily basis as people were becoming aware of this thing called, back then we called it Corona, but becoming aware. And our restaurant colleagues in Seattle and on the West Coast, Seattle and Portland, were telling us what was going on. And this was a full month before we really were addressing this. COVID created this hard pause, right? And the hard pause was frightening. Restaurants didn't know how, we'd never been through this before. So there wasn't a playbook. We were really creating systems on the fly, doing the best we could with remarkably little leadership. And what happened initially is that everyone shut down. People began to pivot, a word I promise I'm going to use that one time here. I just hate the word. It's so overused now, but people began to pivot quickly because people didn't know about the PPP and we needed money and we needed resourcing. So people began to pivot as quickly as possible. But the hard pause, especially now, the hard pause has come to a soft pause, and the soft pause has been accentuated by social unrest right now. And I think that hard pause internally gave us an opportunity to really look at everything we were doing and to upend our assumptions. And I'll give you an example, because we, at not just the leadership level of Pas de Choux, but including other stakeholders at Pas de Choux, including their views, their perspectives, we have really began to upend extreme assumptions that the whole world was making. One of the assumptions that we had to upend immediately was the assumption that restaurants were physical spaces and that people come to restaurants and people dine in and eat at restaurants and people enjoy the restaurant experience. Well, when you have extreme social distancing and mandating, you also cannot have that model of a business. So we've upended some of our own assumptions. Due to the microscope placed on what's going on in the country right now, the upending assumptions has been based around, we've looked internally with an extreme spotlight and a lens. We want to see every crack that's in our system so that we can create a better organization. And so what this time has allowed us to do is to really look at our cracks and to make sure that what we say we are is really what we practice. We say that we're an inclusive organization and we say that we are diverse. And of course, we do have brown and Black people in our company. We need to look further and see how those people are offered opportunities and positioned to grow into positions with true authority, number one. And number two, we are rethinking how we can increase diversity in our own company. Because whether or not you post something, whether or not you post the black square, or whether or not you wear a t-shirt that says, "I can't breathe," the truth of the matter is, when this moment passes, what are we going to return to? What is every organization and every person going to return to? And if you cannot make changes in your own organization, real changes in your own organization, you cannot expect other organizations around you to make their changes. So internally, we are really looking at our systems, our internal biases, recognizing our fault lines, recognizing what our own inherent issues are so that we can be a better organization. Externally, yes, we've had window damage. I'm going to say something that I think is like probably going to push some people's buttons. I'm going to say it anyhow, because I think that your organization is at the forefront of future thought. I truly believe that the damage, first off, it was damage to the windows. The landlords and the tenants are insured. We're going to get the windows fixed. We were not looted. We were not seriously looted. We still are unsure as to who broke the windows. And that is a very disturbing statement. But, you know, that can be fixed. And we're working with our landlords, and our landlords are being very helpful, because what they want is for us to be able to open our business. And what we want is for us to be able to open our businesses. And we need our economy to get going at some point when it's safe for everybody. We need to get going. We need to employ people. We need to give people opportunities. And we just need to be better stewards of the power that we have in this community to make sure that we are supporting organizations that work with our values, organizations that are also doing the right thing. We need to show our support to our Black community in a more significant way. And as women, I think we're going to be at the forefront of making these changes.
You just used the words, Martha, which I associate with you and with the Patashu Foundation, doing the right thing. So take us back 7 years ago when you began it, when you personally decided to step up and, as you say, sometimes step out and start it. What motivated you? What angered you? What did you see in our city, the schools, the children, that made you decide this is what the Patashu Foundation is going to try to do? And we have some video and some wonderful pictures that illustrate the joy that goes on at the Patashu Foundation.
The Patashu Foundation was created 7 years ago. It was our answer to our desire and our stated goal of making a radically different and radically better commitment, having a radically different, radically better commitment to our community, and using the money that comes from profits to do better for our community in a way that truly could make greater impact in solving a single problem. The Patashu Foundation feeds children. We feed children meals, children who live with pervasive food insecurity in our city. And as everybody now knows, but as most people 7 years ago did not know, we have a huge problem with food insecurity in our city. And I thought it was insane, like mind-blowing insane, that we had a situation in Indianapolis public schools where 80% of the students lived in pervasive food insecurity, even though Indianapolis is a capital city and the most populous city in the state, probably the wealthiest city in the state. Also, it didn't escape me that we're in Indiana, a historically agricultural state that is right in the middle of the United States, a first world, if not the shining example of first world countries. And I use shining example, I'm kind of harsh on us right now. So I thought all of this, here we are, Indianapolis, major city in Indiana, agricultural state, in the United States, a gleaming example of first worldness. And we have 80% of our students in our schools unable to eat healthy food and dependent solely on a federal breakfast and lunch program. It just seemed remarkably wrong. And we knew that we could take our resources and do something that was radically different and radically better than what other organizations were doing. And that's exactly what we did. We decided to start our own foundation. The foundation has served, as you stated, over 150,000 meals since its beginning. We have been significantly impacted, as you can imagine, by COVID, because the people we serve have been impacted by COVID more significantly than you can know. I'm sorry, it was really paternalistic of me. Of course you know. And I'll go back to the Davida Davidson quote. When impact of COVID, when it impacts all of us, it's a cough or a cold. But the impact to the children who we serve, it's like pneumonia. To no fault of their own, schools are shut. Their parents are unemployed for the first time, maybe. Unemployment benefits may or may not be coming to their homes. The whole world is at risk of getting sick, possibly dying. And there is disproportionate burden placed again on our communities of color, because they are more greatly impacted by the incredible downside of COVID and the economic downturn.
And you've gone into hyperdrive, haven't you? Giving more meals to these children. You say it's a drop in the ocean of need in our city. What can we do? How can we help?
Being aware and discussing the problem openly and is, of course, the first thing. Reading up. We have tons of resources on our Parachute Foundation website. So I would encourage everybody to go there, not just to learn about what we do, why we do it, and how we do it, but to learn more about hunger and food policy in not just our state, but in the United States. Also, I hate to be crass about it, money is what everyone needs right now. It's what we need too. Our ability to feed children depends truly on our ability to raise money. And it's a sad state of affair, but that's where all of charity and all of philanthropy is. We are donor dependent. So I would ask people to check us out, do your research. We are a bar setting organization. We are very transparent in all of our practices. And we did not skip a beat. We did not close down for one day during this crisis, during this pandemic. In fact, we, as Dion said, we did go into hyperdrive. We normally fed between 1,500 and 2,000 meals a week. We now have doubled that. We doubled that at the beginning of March. We had to change very quickly. We had to segue. Thank you for posting that. We had to segue very quickly with how we were serving the meals and who was serving the meals and where we were serving the meals. We made those decisions at lightning speed. We are now serving meals to multiple children from one family as opposed to just a child who is enrolled in our program. And we are no longer conserved at schools, so we are going to community centers and points of access that make it easy to get our food.
You know, all of that is so inspiring, and I know I came away knowing a little bit more of what I can do and what I can do to help. Finally, for all the women across the city, members of Women for Change, do you have some closing thoughts, some words, that things that we haven't touched on, ways that all this has transformed you, or ways that you want to reach out to all of us?
You know, I really thank you for this opportunity, and I thank your organization for being such a strong voice and advocate for women, particularly women in the margins, women cast aside. I happened to listen to a podcast 2 nights ago And the podcast was one of those aha moment podcasts. The podcast was hosted by Noor Tajori. Noor Tajori is a Libyan American activist and journalist. And the name of her podcast is, I have to read this because I don't know this up, is called The Process. Noor became remarkably famous, I think, overnight because she was the first Muslim woman to pose for Playboy. She posed completely clothed and in her hijab. And she made a true impact on women across the globe by doing that. Her conversation the other night was titled Being Critical of Something You Love. And I really applaud you all because you are openly being critical of something you love. And because you're being critical does not mean that you're not supportive. In fact, you guys are going beyond to make real change in our country and in our community. And I applaud you for that. I was doing work on my desk, getting ready when I was getting ready to interview Davida Davis. I'd like to close with this. And I'm one of these people that keep quotes, and I don't keep them electronically, I write them down. And I have a stack of them, and I've done it since I was actually pretty young. And one of my favorite quotes that I pulled out of the stack that is particularly relevant right now is this quote: "I love America more than any other country in this world. And exactly for that reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." That quote was made over 50 years ago by James Baldwin. And this is just what I'm thinking. You just have to work every day, and we can never, I talk about upending assumptions. We have to upend every assumption that we made about our own complicity, our own participation in systems that oppress and hold other people down. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And thank you, Martha. You've given us sobering realities. You've given us hope. You've taken the pulse on where we are now, and you've shown ways that we can make a difference. You are an activist, an advocate, a successful businesswoman and leader, and you're a philanthropist. And our city, our community, our state is very, very fortunate to have you. So thank you very much. And thanks everyone for participating. And Sandy, I think you have some closing remarks. Thank you.
Yes, well, I would also like to thank Dion for doing this interview. And of course, I would love to thank Martha Hoover for educating us, for inspiring us, and for always doing the right thing. Okay, Martha, I have to take one exception to something you said. You said that you're not a visionary. That is wrong. You said you were not a visionary. You are a visionary, and you provide a wonderful vision for all of us at Women for Change and for everyone listening to this podcast. I encourage people to go to the Patachuk Foundation website to get involved with you, to help contribute to your cause. It is indeed a very important one. And I would also like to educate everyone about Women for Change. In case you don't know, please go to the Women for Change website, which you can see up there right now, changeindiana.org. There is amazing information on there. There is a program coming up on June 24th on Listen, Connect, and Participate on voting, which is so essential now. And you will see a wonderful ally action toolkit, which provides you with ways to stand as an ally right now. So engage with us, engage with the Patachuk Foundation. We are so grateful for amazing leaders and women like you, Martha. Our appreciation, and we look forward to continue to work together to make change in our community. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.